let's start talking about what's happening out there and get you caught up with what has happened and how it's working. Let's look at the dark agenda in a nutshell. In other words, just get a complete brief description of what's occurring in our world right now. Now, what happened was the first part of their plan, and I'm going to go through the various aspects of this plan that they had and show how it is not working, how it is failing, and why it will fail very shortly. First of all, they wanted to flood the world with worthless fiat money, have a vast amount of increase in the inflationary capabilities of the world's currency, which is exactly what happened. We're in a massive inflation since the end of World War II, and especially since the end of the Vietnam War in the 1970s. So that was the first thing. Get rid of hardcore currency, which is what Nixon did in the early 70s, the last aspect of it, and create a fiat world, a world of worthless money. The next thing was to complete their takeover of the world banking system. Major aspects as far as world currency goes is the dollar, the euro, and the yen. This represents the global banking system that has been taken over by the major dark cartels in the banking industry from Japan and Asia across Europe into the Americas, as well as in Africa. Everywhere we are now standing, the world banking system has been taken over by these guys, one way or another. There's been a destruction of local banking all over the world. Another thing they wanted to do was to create a massive global real estate network, making the world's real estate market able to be easily manipulated. This was set up so they could do the next part of their plan, which is a massive use of all kinds of derivatives dealing with real estate, like crazy mortgage plans, etc. The result of this is there have been mortgage plans that they created from this particular thing that they did all over the world. So you have the European banks and their mortgage plans failing, Chinese failing, Japan failing. You have a massive change occurring, of course, here in North and South America as a result of all of this game. So this was their game, to create this easily manipulative network. Okay, now, then they had global gold reserves. They wanted to control, by controlling the world's banking system, to take over the central banking system of the world, and doing that to take over the gold reserves. So what they then attempted to do was, using the Federal Reserve, which then controlled most of the gold in 1945, to then use it as other banks that the Fed would be associated with, once again grew themselves up from the destruction of World War II to become part of their system. And that's basically what they have done. There are the German system, the French system, the Chinese system, etc., is all part of this process. Now, the other thing they wanted to do was massive depopulation of the planet. And so what I'm showing here is one of the slides that I got from people talking about what various depopulation controls would look like. In this case, various forms of false concepts of these plagues walking around, so they could give these quote-unquote shots to prevent these things from happening, and how it actually was there to kill everybody. So I don't think they were trying to get it down to 500,000. I think they were more trying to get it down to more like 500 million. But anyway, that was the idea. So the last part was to completely take over control world governments. The United States government and the governments of Europe, the governments of Asia, the governments of the Americas, the governments of Africa and Oceania, like Australia and New Zealand. They just wanted to completely take them over. Create a one world system. Fascism really is, as Mussolini said it, corporate government, in which large corporations and government get together and create a partnership, which is basically, you don't know where the government ends and corporations begin. And then after they had controlled the world, taken it over with their corporate partners, completely destroyed the economies and taken them over as they wish, so that all the money in the world and all the gold in the world was theirs. They wanted to then send up armies of enslaved people through ships over the next few decades and basically conquer the solar system. Now, as they say, some of the best laid plans of mice and men do not work, and this is what started to happen. The agenda seemed on track. Everything seemed ready to go. There was a complete increase in economies. Economies were blowing along in 2006 like they were totally going to go on forever. Same thing in 2007. And then in 2008, the first major economic bump was hit, the first economic wall in the fall of 2008. And this, of course, was the complete fall of Wall Street because of the overheating of the derivative markets. And so the next bump occurred is an ecological one, is of course the oil spill, which is still in its final stages. Now, this is from a major investment banker. And I got this quote about a day ago, so I thought this would really be fascinating to have. So I'm going to put it in and I'm going to quote it. So this is an anonymous, very important banker saying, "Things are breaking progressively in important places. Those in power are being pushed onto their own swords. What is happening is this monstrous system of total control, a massive system in which the few would be in such a control of the vast majorities. It'd be like maybe 2% of the world would control the other 98%. It began to fall apart." Let's have a look at this and get into a more longer talk about what's happening here. First of all, let's look at the motto of the New World Order, which has basically been the theme of the last 7 United States administrations. Perpetual war for perpetual commerce. Bomb obstinate weak nations, buy off obstinate big ones, rule the world. This basically is what was being attempted. And you can go all the way back to the Johnson administration, forward all the way to the Obama administration, and you will see the same basic concepts in their own unique way being carried out by each president. Now, let's see what happened that caused the impossible, which is this collapse. First of all, the economic implosion. What happened was between 1990, with a giant fall down because of the so-called dot-com companies in the United States, which also affected the world economy, there was a huge overheating of the economy, roughly from the end of the Bush administration, the first Bush administration, as they like to call it in history, Bush 41, to the start of the Clinton administration, to basically the tail end of the Clinton administration. Now, what happens in the late 90s is the first part of the roof begins to fall in. When this first part of the roof begins to fall in, the way that the Fed and the president and Wall Street decide, the president, of course, being President Clinton, decide to try to keep it going is to say, well, Reagan started the deregulation process in the 1980s. He had to basically fall back for a little while because of the S&L, the savings and loan crisis in the United States in the mid-80s. So what he had to do, therefore, was bring back some degree of regulation in terms of various agencies whose job was to basically save the economy between 85 and 87, which they did, because they re-regulated the savings and loans. They got rid of bad savings and loans, and they basically turned the savings and loan industry around. Now, this was now a viable industry. So what the bankers and the investment bankers said was, we have to grab these S&Ls, and we have to take what they're about and use it. And what they're about and what they wanted to use was mortgages. Mortgages were already basically a fraud, but what they wanted to do now was to take the mortgages and move them a step forward, which is to make derivatives out of them. In other words, to make them commercial instruments. That's what they began to do. And what it did was it caused the industry to take off. Now, they couldn't do this, as I was just alluding to, without breaking some rules. So they basically deregulated the rest of the banking industry between 99 and 2001. The result was we had absolutely what you might call a casino set up, a wild casino with no rules.